And we're going to go through today's topic where we want to take a closer look at what fraternities and sororities are doing to leverage data in their efforts to develop a comprehensive prevention program. So to that end, my colleague Nicole Cavallaro will be presenting data from the EverFi's network that we've been sourcing with the fraternities and sororities that work with us. And then we'll be also interviewing a prestigious panel of fraternities and sororities prevention professionals, which will share with you their perspective and best practices on what they're doing out there on the ground. So at this point, I'm going to hand it off to Nicole. Nicole,
Thank you so much, Michele. Thank you for the kind introduction. And I want to thank everyone for joining us for today's webinar about utilizing data for comprehensive prevention within your organizations. As Michele said, my name is Nicole Cavallaro, and I am Associate Director of EverFi's Prevention Education Team. For those of you who I'm unfamiliar with, a bit of background about me: I am a member of Alpha Delta Pi sorority, initiated at the University of Southern California. I also served as the Panhellenic President at USC, and I currently advise the Boston University chapter of AD-Pi. And today I'll be sharing some insights from our EverFi data set, as well as moderate our panel of headquarters professionals. Before we dive in, I'll give a quick introduction of our four panelists, including some fun facts. First, we have Lauren Phillips, the Assistant Executive Director at Tri Sigma. Lauren has been with the sorority for 15 years, and a fun, though slightly precarious fact about her is that in those 15 years of travel, she's never lost her luggage. So we will keep our fingers crossed for you. Next up, we have Jessica King, the Director of Training and Programming at Chi Omega. Jessica has been in her role at headquarters for just over a year and has also had a long history of volunteering for the sorority. As for a fun fact that makes me very jealous, Jessica rescued a puppy last week and is currently welcoming any and all training tips. Next, I'll introduce Andrea Kleekamp, Director of Health and Wellness at Phi Kappa Psi Fraternity. Andrea is relatively new to her role, having been with the organization for just over a year. And Andrea is a die-hard Kansas City Royals fan, so my apologies to any Cardinals fans tuning in for the webinar today. And finally, we have Jess Schabel, Associate Director of Education and Wellness for Phi Kappa Tau Fraternity. Jess has been with the organization for about a year and a half, and fun fact about her is that she was lucky enough to meet Rainn Wilson, best known for his role as playing Dwight Schrute in The Office. And I'll just say that I hope he didn't find any office supplies stuck in Jell-O during that meeting. He probably would not handle that very well. So now that we know all of our panelists, I would first like to dive into EverFi's framework for prevention. Here, you can see a pyramid divided into four sections: institutionalization, critical processes, policy, and programming. Often, when thinking about prevention, we think about programming. We have programs that we deploy from headquarters that serve as tangible offerings for our membership. But as you can see here, we view programming as really the tip of the pyramid. The foundation for all our efforts is the base, institutionalization. And you can understand best practices, but that really won't matter if you don't have the resources and institutional will to execute effectively. Here we ask, is there an institutionalized commitment to prevention? Are there sufficient resources, both staff and budgetary, to make a meaningful dent in the issues we're working to prevent? Are the highest levels of leadership committed to preventing sexual assault, alcohol and substance abuse, and hazing? With institutionalized support, we can look to critical processes, the engine that powers programming and policy efforts. And here, we can, 1, collect data, and 2, learn from it in a meaningful way. The data tells us where we should put our resources. It informs our policy and ultimately focuses our programming efforts through honing in on the greatest areas of need. It also measures effectiveness and knowledge gain, ensuring our resources are being utilized to best meet the needs of our organization. In seeing how powerful data can be, this is really where we'll focus in today's webinar. And so I'd now like to take the time to ask our panelists about the status of their organizations in terms of prevention, specifically the organizational commitment to prevention. So Andrea, we will open it up to you.
Sure. So as shared earlier, I joined the Phi Kappa Psi team as the Director of Health and Wellness in December 2015. So in my role, my primary focus is to oversee and implement our Elevate initiative, and that's our umbrella health and wellness prevention-based work. That was actually first conceptualized in fall 2014, so it does predate me a bit. But really comprehensive build-out began in early 2016 as I kind of expanded it, understood my role and kind of where the organization was at and wanted to go. I'd say this last semester, fall 2016, was really the first time we were kind of firing on all cylinders, if you will. So we are currently doing kind of online education, in-person offerings through our consultant visits, awareness campaigns through our social media, campus resource connection. In our next phase in process, we're collecting content from authors to be utilized for some peer workshops. That said, we're still really, I think, in the beginning stages of our work, but I also think we're on the right track to collecting our data, implementing our programs, and figuring out our kind of our long-term strategic priorities and plan.
Thank you. Jess, we'll now hear from you.
Yeah, similar to Andrea at Phi here at Phi Kappa Tau, we're in the very early stages of shifting our focus more towards prevention. When I started staff about 1.5 years ago, we were definitely more of an organization that would react when incidents occurred, and then like if a chapter had an incident, going there and trying to help them instead of giving them the tools to be thinking about how to prevent that from even occurring. So we definitely are in the early stages of that shift, but I'm very lucky that we have the support of not only the staff, our national council, who's been very vocal about that support and wanting the shift to occur. So even though we are in those early stages, we are being more strategic about utilizing our data and more strategic about our approaches and not just reacting and throwing, everything and the good book at people to try to get them to try to cover our butts, if you will.
Great, thank you. Lauren?
Sure. I would say that we have been focusing on prevention from a standpoint of hazing for much longer time than we unfortunately have with alcohol. I think that if you'd asked me that question 5-10 years ago, I would have thought that we were doing some prevention efforts, and unfortunately I think we're really just doing policy education. So I think we've been doing hazing programming for a while, or anti-hazing programming for a while. The alcohol prevention programming started closer to 2013, and I think since we just started with Greek Life EDU in the last year, that's really expanded our prevention efforts for more than just alcohol and hazing. I think kind of depending on the topic would tell you what phase we are, if you will, in terms of prevention. I think that what we've noticed over the years, though, in doing some of this, is that the data was an important part of obtaining the money, and I think that's really for us been how we have worked to support some of the programming that we're doing outside of Greek Life EDU as well. We have a team of volunteers that goes in and does in-person training for our chapters as a group, and then we also have several prevention institutes that we do that support our risk managers, our advisors, and then our judicial boards, their internal judicial boards. And we're really lucky that because of that data, our foundation's been able to support a lot of that, and so much to the point that high-risk behaviors was really kind of incorporated into our strategic plan within the last three years, and not because there was a major incident, fortunately, but because we were realizing that we had some work to do, because we were able to compare where we were compared to maybe some other components, and while we're doing well in some areas, there were other red flags that we needed to address. And so thankfully there was easy support in that, because we had the information to let us know that proactively instead of a major incident.
Great, that's wonderful. And Jessica?
Yes, hi everyone. In terms of Chi Mega Fraternity, prevention falls within my role as part of training and programming. So we have 2 full-time staff members leading that effort alongside leadership programming and many other initiatives. So in order to best use our resources, we also lean heavily and rely on our trained national volunteers on a risk management committee when it comes to our prevention efforts. Our national volunteers help us with strategic decisions, brainstorming, capacity building, but are also really on the ground for chapter-based workshops such as the Alcohol Skills Training Program. And in terms of funding these initiatives, we do have a strong partnership with the Chi Mega Foundation and have had great successes in securing donors, not only to subsidize our use of Greek Life EDU, but also for those in-person workshops and other online education. Chi Mega has had a commitment for a number of years to require that every member completes online alcohol education on an annual basis. And it is our aspiration that over the course of their collegiate experience, our members will eventually receive at least one alcohol skills training program workshop. We are not there yet, but as we look ahead and think about how to continue to make that organizational commitment, we know that that is a goal that we are trying diligently to work towards. That would allow us to not only be reactive, but to continue our efforts to be proactive as much as possible.
Great, thank you. So with that, let's dive into a few insights. We've learned from our national data set of approximately 83,000 fraternity and sorority members that over 33% of brothers and sisters have not had a drink in the past 2 weeks. We consistently find that about half of those who complete Greek Life EDU fall into either the non-drinker category, 0 drinks in the past 2 weeks, or the light drinker category, 1 to 3 drinks for women and 1 to 4 drinks for men at least once in the past 2 weeks. Though students in the Greek community drink at higher rates compared to non-Greek students, it's important as we develop prevention plans to keep this population of abstainers and moderate drinkers in mind. Moving on, approximately 24% of members experienced negative academic consequences from drinking in the past 2 weeks, and only 9% believe that alcohol is important to their organization. Coincidentally, we have seen problematic drinking rates, 8 or more drinks for women or 10 or more drinks for men at least once in the past 2 weeks, also hover around that 9% mark. Regarding participant attitudes, we see a majority of membership responding in healthy ways to questions about the role they can play in preventing sexual violence in their organization and the high placement of value on a partner giving consent before sex. And finally, we see that 79% of Greek Life EDU participants would support a no hazing policy for their organization. As our data can also be used to help clarify norms within our chapters, one positive finding was that 79% was the same percentage of members who feel their peers would also support such a policy. So some good news there. As we compare these findings to that of the 2015-2016 academic year, we see that these percentages have not changed much. But numbers can be instrumental in deciding where resources and time should be allocated. In seeing percentages demonstrating that approximately a third of participants haven't had a drink in the past 2 weeks, we need to be thoughtful about the assumptions we make and the messaging we use. We also acknowledge that for those deploying Greek Life EDU to their membership, you are receiving a lot of data. Organizing findings and being strategic about utilizing them suggests the need for direction and a plan. So with that, I'll ask our panelists, what was the turning point that made you realize you should develop a prevention plan? And if you have a prevention plan, how did you utilize data to build it?
So I joined the Phi Kappa Psi team after spending about 8 years on campuses in risk management ed, fraternity, sorority life, and prevention education. So I came into a role where I was familiar with prevention work, and there was also kind of that explicit need and want to build that out. But I would say, like, strangely enough, quite random, but a moment where I said to myself, like, yes, we're on the right track was when I saw this local news story on men's health, and it focused on 10 years of research by the American Academy of Family Physicians about when men do and don't seek help. Not so fun fact, 30% of men wait as long as possible to seek treatment when they're sick. But the quote that stuck with me from that story, and it's one that I reference a lot when I'm framing this work, particularly with our alumni and getting folks on board, is this: not feeling sick is not necessarily the same as being healthy. And so it's really the importance of those front-end prevention behaviors. I think looking beyond kind of this like random aha moment to kind of build out our plan, I've consulted a lot of research-based articles and books. So I spend a lot of time in my local library and utilizing kind of the free resources they have available. And then a lot of just best practices and models within higher education. So there's been lots of great conversation, collaboration, and just like kind of consultation with the folks at EverFi, with other headquarters, with campus professionals, and then, you know, with our my FiSci colleagues, our alumni and undergraduates.
And this is Lauren from Tri Sigma. I would say the turning point for me personally was we actually, I mentioned 2013 earlier, and that's when we changed some of our social event policies. And we went from a place of being what I would consider somewhat restrictive, meaning that we were really only doing things at third-party vendors and date functions, to allowing BYOB events, some co-sponsored functions with more than just one other group. And as we started to look at just the processes and procedures around that, the other question that we started to ask was really, are our members equipped to really manage these kind of functions? And as a result, in doing some research, that's when we sort of realized that we really weren't doing prevention programming and helping them be responsive and think ahead for those kind of things. We were really just training them on how to register an event or how to do, how to understand the policies. So I think really the shift in the policy is what helped us open our eyes to realize there was really some other work that we could do. And I think it helped us realize that we weren't really asking questions about individual students' drinking habits or even what the culture looked like on that campus. It had always been in the framework of just events that were registered in Tri Sigma functions. And I think that we felt a responsibility to really help them understand that these skills and this knowledge shouldn't just be applied at a Tri Sigma function. This needs to be something that we're thinking about regardless of what function that we're attending and whether it's at home or at school and those types of things. So we, I regret it now in hindsight, looking at the data and the information that we're getting from Greek Life EDU, but we set out on an adventure to create our own assessment. And so we utilize that data to then develop the curriculum for our prevention institutes to, we call them the triennial visits. So every chapter gets one of this in-person visit every 3 years. So it helped us come up with their objectives for the programming, as well as thinking about a brand new volunteer position to help us facilitate and implement that programming. So it wasn't just myself on a staff level that was overseeing prevention work, but a team of volunteers and trained facilitators as well.
Great, thank you. That's really great. So EverFi also deployed a climate survey to over 30,000 students during the 2015 to 2016 school year. And we asked students what organizations they were a part of, so we're able to stratify here by Greek status. And one interesting finding that came out of the surveys is that about half as many students in fraternities and sororities report never consuming alcohol to get drunk as compared to their unaffiliated peers. So another way of saying this is that since the start of the academic year, about 69% of unaffiliated students have intentionally consumed alcohol to get drunk, compared to about 85% of fraternity and sorority members. And we've learned from Greek Life EDU that nearly 30% of members are currently trying to drink alcohol in a healthier and safer way, and 40% are thinking about drinking in a safer way. As we consider developing comprehensive prevention plans, it is essential that we provide these numbers with the tools and skills to effectively change the way they drink. So in seeing how numbers like these might alter the messaging we send our students, I'll now ask, how have you used aggregate data to benefit your organization?
Here at Phytol, we're still, again, pretty early with our process. We just rolled out Greek Life EDU last semester with our members. But what we've been doing so far is for our educational programs that take place this semester is pulling some key data points and presenting them to our members. For example, we have regional conferences that take place each weekend in February. And for those certain chapters that are at those regional conference, we pull the data on those groups to kind of present it overall. Here's what you're doing regionally. We have gotten a great response from it. The men love seeing specific like Phytol data and what we're doing compared to the national numbers, which has been great. And we've been really careful as an organization to focus on those positive things that our members are doing, just to try to do that social norming in the right way and not focusing on any negative trends that we're seeing with our members.
This is Lauren from Tri Sigma, and I think to build on that, it really has opened up the dialogue. I think where before maybe we were kind of seeing some patterns, or we're listening to officers with some of their struggles, or advisors, or campus partners, and this really gave us something to really focus on, to say like, okay, either their assumptions are correct, or what we thought was the problem really wasn't the problem. But I think specifically within Tri Sigma, from the perception of the students, everything was so strict when it came to the rules. We really closed off ourselves from being able to open up the dialogue and be able to have a conversation about the problems that they were really facing. And I think far too often we were asking, like, what are we going to do? Instead of saying, like, what is it that we're trying to solve, or what is the problem? And so the data has helped us kind of recognize the what, but then to open up that conversation to talk with the students about the why and the how, and get advisors engaged in that as well. So it's more than just like, here's the information. We've got some work to do in certain areas. And it was more so about like, what does this mean? And let's talk about it. Because before, I really think that it was easier to say, no, we're not having social functions. No, our members aren't struggling with, whether drug usage or mental health concerns. That just isn't happening here. And when it's right here in front of you, there's not really a question for that. And people are like, yes, we do need help. So it's been really interesting that folks have been willing to partner with us in a different way because we have had the data.
And this is Jessica with Chi Mega, and I would just, add, based on what others have described, that the benefit of having the wide-ranging data is that not only can we look organizationally at all of our members who complete some of the programming efforts that we offer and, who go through the required EverFi training with us, but we can then break that out into segments, and we can find ways to share it with our chapter services staff to talk about chapter-specific concerns, to talk about trends and things that they're seeing in the region, so with the subset of chapters that they work most closely with, and figure out what that means in that particular cultural context. And we can share all of these variations with our governing council in terms of strategically, where are we going, and where is Chi Mega showing up relative to other organizations, relative to the non-Greek population, and really sit with that and take an honest look at our membership and their experiences and what they're identifying for us. So we strive really diligently to do those things on a quarterly basis, as well as through some annual reporting as we think about where we need to go next, what we need to add, or what might be missing. And I would just note that some of the high-level data also serves us particularly well as we think about reporting to the Chi Mega Foundation and making the case for where and how and why funds are being used that they're able to secure for us.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And as previously mentioned, data can be essential for clarifying norms. And in our climate survey, we asked students how likely they would be to support others who confront harmful or problematic behavior. And we saw that approximately 80% of collegians, both Greek and non-Greek, said they would likely be supportive. However, when we asked how likely do you think most students at your school would be to support others who confront harmful or problematic behavior, we see that number significantly drop to just under 48%. So this then raises the question, why is there nearly a 32% difference in what individuals say they would do versus what they think others would do? Data has the power to successfully challenge these beliefs and lay the groundwork for behavior change. So with that, what has been the greatest success utilizing data? And what has been the greatest challenge?
I think a really big success for Phi Kappa Psi is really simply having data, particularly having data where students, through their own voices, articulate the benefits of what we're doing with programs, which really helps us affirm where we're headed, where we want to be, and also to kind of get other students on board. I think an interesting success story I would share, it came with data we collected as a result of a social media campaign around Suicide Prevention Week in September. We didn't get as much kind of buzz as we thought we would with retweets, shares, likes, but we sent out a survey to our membership following the week that told us kind of a very different story. And it showed us that our students were listening more than we realized. And so with that, 82% of the respondents to that survey indicated an awareness that we'd done the campaign. More importantly, 97% of those respondents indicated mental health issues were a concern for college students, and then 96% of those students agreed with the importance of Phi Kappa Psi specifically raising awareness on this topic. And so it was important for us to kind of have that back-end content so we knew that we should continue to do the campaign and not scrap it. I think a challenge is making sure we don't over-assess so that our tools aren't utilized or we have survey fatigue with our members. To combat this, we've really started to kind of look at ways we can collect data within structures we've already had. So we use the custom questions in Greek Life EDU to get information on topics our members want more education on, which was then able to inform some of our priorities on some content rollout. We did a Movember men's health philanthropic campaign that we wanted to assess, and we actually used our regional officer trainings when we had a captive audience in the room to get some data there rather than sending out an email where our response rates likely would have been lower.
Okay, and this is Lauren. Sorry, I just got a new computer, so apparently clicking mute and unmute was difficult. I would say our greatest success was really just increasing the engagement around a prevention conversation. I feel like that we probably sounded like the Charlie Brown teacher to some of our students and advisors beforehand, or it's just like, wah, 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 I'm not really paying attention. But when we're able to put the data in front of them, it surprised me in how invested they were in either keeping those numbers or decreasing those numbers and increasing safety. And I think that that was like the key part of it, is that we were focused on safety. We weren't focused on perfection. We were focused on taking some steps toward better, and they were willing to be a partner in making that better. I think the challenge was always, since we were sharing some of those data pieces, helping sort of also corral and not letting people take that information and run with it and then therefore draw incorrect conclusions. So they were trying to make some assumptions or put in some reasons for why those things were happening that really wasn't there. And so I think taking the first time that we shared some of that information, we didn't take the time to share with them like the background and some questions that it all kind of came together to kind of pull that information into one big piece. And it had them going down a path that maybe wasn't entirely correct, but I mean, all with the right intentions. So that was like really the biggest challenge, was just making sure that people weren't taking it to a place based on their own personal experiences and what some of their conclusions were. And this is why I think this data point is like this, and this is why I think it's different in Tri-Sigma compared to some of the other groups. So I think really helping them understand that, look, like this, we just got to look at this for the surface level here. We don't have to leap to any sort of conclusions. So I think having that conversation in a controlled environment, what was a challenge at first, but it was actually some good skill building for them too, to help them understand how to use that information and what to do with it next.
Great, thank you. So our climate survey data also sought to measure student engagement. And across the board, we found that members of fraternities and sororities are more likely than their unaffiliated peers to agree that they feel closer to people at their school, feel like they are a part of their institution, and are overall happy to be there. And as we look at important figures such as retention across both institutions and national organizations, engagement and satisfaction with these entities can shed light on what is making for the most meaningful of experiences. And beyond satisfaction and engagement, we've also learned that our Greek students are more involved and exposed to what takes place on campus. Members agree more than their unaffiliated peers that their institutions could do more to protect students from harm, and that their school responds too slowly in difficult situations. However, fraternity and sorority members were also more likely than their unaffiliated peers to agree that their school would handle a crisis well, and that officials handle negative incidents in a fair and responsible manner. It's important to note that an answer choice for these questions is, I do not have any knowledge or experience around this to offer a response. And we found that across the board, fraternity and sorority members were less likely to select this response, further highlighting greater rates of exposure to happenings on campus. As I've shared data from two different sources from the 2015-2016 academic year, this leads to the next question to the panelists of what other data are you collecting and what do you feel like you're missing?
For Phi Kappa Psi, we have also introduced a new accreditation program in the 16-17 school year, which allows us to kind of evaluate and track chapter operations and programming. And I think that allows us to look at not just the member experience, but the overall kind of chapter experience, which I think is particularly helpful when you think about kind of that socio-ecological mindset. I also maintain comprehensive campus resource guides for every campus we're on. And while that's not like data, I would say this has been really a key connector in prevention work and making sure our members are accessing the resources within their own community. And then we're assessing all of our other in-person programs. Right now, we've had lots of discussions, kind of high-level, long-term discussions about how do we assess the comprehensive member experience, and really kind of helping us figure out and understand, like, how does all the stuff we're doing intersect, relate, and connect to our members. We'd also at some point like to think about and assess how does all of this stuff impact our members beyond their undergraduate years. And so we really want to know, like, how are we kind of aiding our membership in creating healthy lifestyles across the lifespan.
And at Phi Tau, again, since we are just now starting the process of reviewing our data we collected with Greek Life EDU, we honestly haven't even started having that conversation of what other data should we be collecting. But I think that as we start getting through everything this semester with what we are learning from our members, we'll be able to kind of figure out where those gap areas are and figure out what else do we need to be collecting. I think what we're missing that we'll definitely be able to utilize our data for is really getting that buy-in from all of our chapter advisors. We've been lucky that for the most part, the majority have really bought into Greek Life, not only Greek Life EDU, but prevention education. But we still have those tricky advisors of trying to get them shift a little bit in their thinking. And I think the more that we see in our data and the more we're able to pull out with that, we'll be able to have intentional and direct conversations to show how they can best support their chapters with prevention education and really get that buy-in.
And within Chi Mega, I think in addition to all of the EverFi reporting and how we sift through that data, we do have end of session 1 month and 3 month survey touch points when we are in direct workshops with our collegians for risk management programming. And so we spend a lot of time looking through those and following up and again communicating up to the chapter services staff and the Chi Mega Foundation with those data points. I think for us as well, we are trying to identify comprehensively, are we reaching our members in the way that we hope to, and are we addressing the relevant concerns that are on their minds? So we, last year, around this time, did a separate Greek Life EDU related survey that we pushed out to our membership to see what their perceptions are there. We also did some surveying during a workshop at the national meeting we just wrapped up to ask our members to directly identify their top risk management concerns. And I think from that, we continue to see alcohol use and abuse identified as the #1 concern. So knowing that there's still a disconnect or an opportunity there to do a little bit more, to do things differently. And then I think what we're also beginning to consider even more thoughtfully in terms of intersections is how things like social media concerns play into the alcohol-related concerns, the interconnections there, and the education that our members need on all of those fronts to make good, thoughtful decisions and also support one another in terms of things like bystander intervention and the sisterhood elements that we want to drive home in everything that we do.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So as we've shared some new insights today and have heard from our panelists about how they utilize data, I really hope you've been able to see how chapters who are just beginning to work with data and chapters who have been collecting data for years are successfully honing in on what will best serve their organizations. As previously mentioned, there's a lot of data we can collect, and we don't always have the resources to adequately analyze and put it all to use. That being said, however, data can allow us to see the greatest areas of need and can help make the case for resource allocation. It can focus our efforts and show tangible growth. And it can not only inform policy and programming, but can make the case to organizational leadership that this is an area of need of institutionalized support. So hopefully today you've learned a bit about the data we gather and how organizations have been able to successfully leverage it in their prevention efforts. So with that, I'd like to conclude today's webinar, and in doing so, I want to take the time to thank our panelists for offering their experience and insights, and of course to all of our attendees for spending 45 minutes of your day with us. And with that, I'll turn it now back to Michele.
Hello there, Nicole. Thank you so much for running this wonderful webinar. I also want to join you in thanking our presenters, Andrew Kleekamp, Jessica King, Jessica Shovel, and Lauren Phillips. You've been great in working with us, and I think you've offered very useful perspectives to the people in the audience today. And I also believe that this interactive format of the webinar was particularly useful in a way and enjoyable for the people who attended. So and obviously, again, thanks to you, Nicole, because you brought all of this together. For those of you who are still with us, I wanted to run a quick poll. If you could bear with us just a second, because we've obviously been through very important aspects of prevention and what that means for fraternities and sororities, which we at EverFi see as part, obviously, of the higher ed world, but we appreciate to have their specificities. So inside of what Nicole and our presenters, the panelists today, have been going through, we'd like to ask you if you'd be kind enough to respond to this poll that I'm going to launch in just a second, is what is the area of concern where your organization may require EverFi's help in reviewing possible training solutions? So is it hazing prevention, substance abuse, sexual misconduct, assault prevention, or you may have no ongoing concerns, or there's something that we haven't listed here that you think requires attention. So if I see people are already voting, so thanks for those of you who are responding to the poll. I'm going to give it another couple of seconds to allow everybody to put their answer in. You're having a great response, so that's always a good sign. All right, well, we had about 70 people reply, so I'm going to close it out and see what the breakdown was and share it with the audience. So it looks like sexual misconduct and assault prevention is the biggest concern for most of you. Substance abuse prevention is second there, and hazing prevention is third. And there's other concerns that we might have not addressed. I noticed nobody said we have no ongoing concerns, which I think it's very cautious and thoughtful way of addressing these important topics. So thank you so much for obviously replying and letting us know what out there in the real world is keeping you up at night. And so we'll take this in great consideration for the way we also go about helping you solving these issues. So I'm gonna hide the results of the poll for now. Nicole, we're back to your screen, so we're just seeing the site. Perfect. And I'd say at this point, the webinar, as Nicole said, is over. It's been about 45 minutes. We want to thank all of you for having been with us. I've been monitoring the questions. It seems like we had a few come in, but there's, one is just about getting the slides. So that brings me to the housekeeping items I'm just going to mention real quick before we close this out. So yes, everybody will get a copy of the slides and that pertain to this presentation. A full recording of the discussion we had today will also be mailed to you in the same email. And before when you close this event out in just a few minutes, a quality survey is going to launch, and it's going to ask your feedback on today's webinar. So it's obviously non-mandatory, but we do welcome your feedback greatly. So if you can be kind enough to spend 2-3 minutes to fill that in to let us know what you thought, we will review your answers closely, and we will take them in great consideration for designing future events. With that, I would like to bring this to a close. And again, I'm just going to thank our great panelists and my colleague Nicole Cavallaro for this wonderful event today, and to all of you who have attended and who have stayed tuned with us until now. Thanks very much, and we hope to see you up on our next webinars. Thank you.